Alright, I have a message to the South African community. I'm aware that literally thousands of people from South Africa are watching my recent videos on Satanism, and I'd just like to address your nation specifically as a group, judging from several different things that I think might be driving this interest. I think the most likely explanation is that, and I've seen a lot of news articles on this because I frequent news sources that aren't exactly mainstream, because I don't trust mainstream news as any reasonable individual would. There seems to be a lot going on in South Africa involving fear surrounding satanic cults. I'd like to point out something to those of you who are from South Africa in regards to Satanism. Most of these cult groups, which sacrifice people, which practice literal witchcraft, literally like, boiling a cauldron and putting bones in it, unearthing the dead, desecrating churches, most of those groups are not actually Satanists. They are devil worshippers. There's a big difference. Satanism is about yourself, independence, rational thought, logic, nature, things which benefit mankind. Devil worship, and I would differentiate that also from theistic Satanism, and I'll explain that too. Devil worship is the worshipping of the Christian version of Satan. And literally, it is a form of Christianity. What people need to understand, and they will drag in occult elements from voodoo or hoodoo or whatever, what they're doing is they're taking the Christian religion, they're looking at it saying Satan sounds cooler than God, and they're worshipping Satan. You need to understand, though, Satanists don't worship Satan. There are theistic Satanists, and here's the difference between them and devil worshippers, because again, these cults are primarily devil worshippers. Theistic Satanists worship a pagan entity, as I've pointed out, called Satya, from Vedic tradition. It's more of a Hindu figure. And they talk about Kundalini and meditation and yoga. It's essentially an Eastern spiritual movement. It has nothing to do with the Christian notion of the devil whatsoever. So if you're afraid, if the reason why you're coming onto these videos is because you're assuming, and I know I list my nation as South Africa, I'm not South African. That might be the other possibility, is that maybe people are confused and think I'm some sort of guru actually in South Africa. I would point out that there are much more malevolent forces in South Africa today. For instance, the Destiny movement. If you've ever seen anything like that, these people shaving their heads and talking about essentially what equates to anarcho-communism, you would find there are groups already in South Africa that are a hell of a lot more malevolent than Satanists. Pointing out again, most of the groups you'd be worried about aren't actually Satanists. I think the other possibility is that people over there are genuinely interested in Satanism, and that led to these various cults forming. You need to, if you're interested in Satanism, and you're interested in the philosophies of Satanism, you need to get your information on what Satanism is from a reliable source. A group of teenagers sacrificing cats under the full moon in a graveyard and creating an organization out of it is not a reliable source. This is something called the Order of the Ram. I haven't studied any of these groups, so I can't judge them per se. My feeling is the reaction to these groups seems to indicate they are theistic in nature, and not theistic Satanists, but actual devil worshippers. There's an article on Bob Larson's website, and Bob Larson is a big-time televangelist who now does mostly radio and live, you can call them performances because they're basically scripted. Has actually something on his website about South African Satanism and talking about that. I will tell you people something that you need to know. And it involves the 1980s, and it involves Satanism in the United States. Satanism started in the United States. It flourished in the 70s. There was a pagan sort of occult revival in the wake of the hippie movement because those people turned to various alternate spiritualities because they were altering their mind with drugs. Satanism was straight out of San Francisco. It was a refutation essentially of this laissez-faire hippie movement of the government shouldn't do anything, we should just sort of run around and have sex and do drugs. What you must realize is that in the 1980s, what happened to Satanism was that people started listening to heavy metal. Some teenagers and 20-somethings got the wrong idea, literally started worshiping Satan, and I will point out exactly how this happened. The Christian movement in the 70s looked at heavy metal. They looked at bands like Black Sabbath. They looked at bands like that. They said these are satanic bands. They are literally worshiping the devil. They told their kids, don't you dare listen to that Ozzy. Don't you dare listen to, this band or that band, Coven or anything like that, because you'll start worshiping the devil. The kids liked the music. They would listen to it under the nose of their parents. They would say, wow, this is cool. And I hear this is, what's Satan? What's Satanism? What's witchcraft? They didn't know. There was no internet back then for them to turn to. They would get their information primarily from misunderstanding the lyrics of songs and misunderstanding things that they read, handed out by, sort of the left-leaning anarchist papers of the time, especially in California. So what happened in the 80s was that a handful of these kids did organize little clubs and called themselves Satanists. They weren't actually Satanists. They were totally deluded, and they were worshiping the devil. They started sacrificing animals, desecrating graves in churches, burning churches down, occasionally killing people and raping people and all of these other things. But they were never Satanists. In the 80s, what happened is the televangelists and, the so-called family-friendly organizations, what the hell is her name, Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, and the Bob Larsons of the world realized that by fighting this force, they could infuriate the right wing and get their politicians elected. So what you see in South Africa today, because I see it happening, and I'm going to forewarn you about these events, and I notice thousands of you are watching my videos related to the topic. If ever there was a video you should spread to your friends on the topic, this would be it. To inoculate yourselves against a satanic panic and a moral crusade which results in your country being usurped by evangelicals who want to tell you how to dress, how to have sex, and who you can or cannot associate with, and telling you what you can think and read, in order to inoculate yourselves against this, you need to understand you are probably going through a similar situation to what we went through in the 1980s. It forced Satanism underground and forever tarnished its name because of the actions of devil worshippers who called themselves Satanists but never were. These individuals primarily killed animals, raped people, and raised hell because they were obsessed with heavy metal and graphic art and all of these things which their parents told them not to get into because children will rebel. So my message to South Africa is don't end up like the United States, because in the 1980s, look what happened. Moral outrage, bunch of new laws regulating life, a bunch of idiot right-wing politicians, and it took us 20 years to fully recover from it. We're still recovering in a way from the sort of moral panic of the 1980s, so don't allow that to happen to your country. There's also another possibility as to why they're spreading, and that's, well, I'm not even sure if I should mention it, because supposedly my ex-wife is living in South Africa. I have no clue if she's aware that this channel even exists. If you are aware and you're watching and or spreading these videos, that's fine with me. It could be that you're just watching them thousands of times over and over. I highly doubt that. I think a much more adequate explanation is people in South Africa are legitimately concerned about people who are actually sacrificing animals. Another thing you've got to realize is that, like with the United States, these cases were sporadic at best. They didn't pose a threat to the general population. The vast majority of cases were solitary or small group individuals that ended up getting arrested anyway. They will be prosecuted. Trust me when I say, and I know that South Africans love their metal and their grindcore because I've talked with South Africans, that could be part of the problem. that this music is entering more of the mainstream and is actually like getting individuals involved with the occult, and they're too young to understand what these movements actually entail. They're not intellectual, they're not intellectualizing it, they're just sort of, swinging a cat around their head. But be it known, no, Satanism itself doesn't pose a threat to any society that it happens to be in. If all the world were Satanists, you would never see any mention of sacrifice or any of these things, because we simply laugh at the notion of such things. To me, the idea of killing another being, or, cutting myself and draining it into a chalice, or desecrating a grave or a church or whatever is foreign to me, because these things have no interest to me. There may be a handful of actual Satanists who think they're funny, and I do have to admit the idea of a church burning is entertaining to me, but I'm certainly not going to risk the punishment involved to actually go out and burn a church, and anyone who is quite frankly absolutely out of their minds stupid. So South Africa, don't worry about Satanists. What you should be calling them is devil worshippers, and if your media is lying to you, as it likely is, because let's face it, mainstream media lies to the people of whatever country it happens to be lodged in like a cancerous tumor. They're probably just telling you that a bunch of Satan worshippers are running around raping people randomly. That's probably not actually happening. They might be misinterpreting crimes that have no occult connection at all to occult crimes. They may be misinterpreting Christian symbols as satanic symbols. They may be misinterpreting bored teenagers obsessed with heavy metal with actual Satanists, which simply is farcical in nature. So that's my message to South Africa. And I used to know some words in Afrikaans, but I don't anymore, because that was years ago. But I hope to see you on my videos. Also, I noticed one final thing. I'm not sure why, but it's almost all coming from mobile traffic, like, I guess, iPhones and Androids and stuff. I'm not sure exactly, maybe these satanic movements are actually spreading the videos around, in which case, I mean no disrespect to your groups, I'm sure many of you are legitimate, actual satanic organizations, but at the same time, like, if you're going to be active about anything, be active about educating people about the truth of legitimate Satanism. If you are legitimate Satanists and atheistic, or theistic but pagan, people need to know the truth before you do get a 1980s moral panic and the government starts putting you in prison for just being a Satanist. Because that did happen in the 1980s. So keep that in mind. If any of you wish, you could feel free to explain to me, if you happen to know why I'm getting so many views from South Africa, because I'm not sure. I just don't know. But it all seems to be satanic videos and political philosophy. Hopefully your government won't get wind of it and ban my channel like the French did, or like the Israelis did. So that's about it. Ave, peace out, etc.